Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. The illegal tobacco trade has become a very lucrative business worldwide. In Australia, for example, illegal excise-evading cigarettes now comprise half of the products sold to the country's 2.7 million smokers, according to the ABC. It's thought that $10 billion a year in revenue there is going straight into the pockets of organised crime. But has this trend made it to New Zealand shores? And how much of a headache is it causing those protecting our borders? Today on The Front Page, Head of Fraud and Prohibition, Chief Customs Officer Nigel Barnes is with us to discuss how they're cracking down on illegal tobacco. First off, Nigel, what are some key trends you've seen in illegal tobacco smuggling over the years?
Well, over recent years, the efforts to smuggle illicit tobacco have become more sophisticated and been of larger quantities. In particular, we're seeing that illicit tobacco smugglers will mirror what we see drug smugglers do. So they'll use similar concealment methods and similar tradecraft, such as using shelf companies.
Have you seen an increase recently?
Yes, it's trended upwards over the last few years. It does, I guess, fluctuate a little bit depending on the type of illicit tobacco and the groups involved. But in the main, it's travelling upwards. How
much are you seeing at the border?
Well, an example is last October, following a referral from the Overseas Customs Administration, we seized over 2 million cigarettes in a container from Southeast Asia. And that represents roughly $3 million worth of revenue evasion.
Wow, and that's just some of the kind of volumes. Hey, what types of illegal tobacco products are most commonly intercepted, and has that changed?
Most commonly it'll be cigarettes, but we do have a market for chewing tobacco and also shisha tobacco, as well as loose tobacco.
How does Customs handle these seized illegal tobacco products? Like, what happens when you're caught importing and then you've got what was it, 2 million cigarettes to dispose of? What do you do with them?
Well, they get disposed of safely, but basically they'll end up in landfill.
Right. And what happens to those caught importing or distributing it, say?
So we prosecute to the full extent of the law that we can, and we don't exclusively charge for customs offences as well. So an example of that is last year where an individual in Christchurch broke into a warehouse and stole a large amount of tobacco from that warehouse. That then led to a burglary investigation. The police led that part of it, and then once it was established that this was actually a illicit tobacco manufacturing effort, Customs then charged him with the illegal manufacture, the unlawful import of the tobacco, as well as the burglary. He was sentenced earlier this year to 2 years and 8 months imprisonment.
What's the maximum penalty if I was to say try and smuggle in 2 million cigarettes from Southeast Asia, say?
So the maximum penalty is 5 years imprisonment under the Customs and Excise Act offences. However, what we find is that people rarely stick to this one type of offending. So it's quite common for us to see crossover with drug offending as well as money laundering. Where we identify those offences, we charge for those as well.
What is the alternative? Do you then drop legal cigarettes back to $20 in order to compete, $20 a pack? They're currently about $60 a pack to compete with the illegal tobacco. You can't. You absolutely can't.
Why not?
Because you can't. The smoking rates would first of all go through the roof, because if you actually look at the statistics, they've halved since the excise was first introduced. So it actually is working to do what its main purpose is, which is to cut smoking rates and therefore help the public health system, obviously look after the well-being of the country. But on top of that, its second purpose is obviously to raise tax as well.
Do you think that it's seen as more low risk than trying to smuggle, say, Class A drugs? Because you've got a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment versus life imprisonment.
Well, what I think motivates these criminals is actually the money. So yeah, there is a difference in the maximum penalty, maximum term of imprisonment. But what really hurts these guys is when you take their money and take their assets. So wherever possible, we make referrals and we work quite closely with the Police Asset Recovery Unit, because what really hurts them is taking away their ill-gotten gains.
Why do you think organised crime groups are becoming increasingly involved in tobacco smuggling?
Well, there is a lot of money in it. There's no doubt about it. In 2018, which is a wee while ago now, we found $4 million in cash in a storage unit, and that was the proceeds of illicit tobacco.
Where are these products ending up?
Well, a lot of them are retailed throughout the country. There are various ways that various outlets, I'm not just talking about dairies, it could be restaurants as well, online as well, in chat groups, as well as through community organisations.
Well, looking at some of the figures here, it looks like the revenue from the tobacco excise tax peaked in 2020. Then it's been dropping since. Does that make you believe that more smokers are, in fact, turning to the black market?
I think it's probably fair to say that the illicit market is increasing and the smoking rate is dropping. So as the overall consumption goes down, the size of the illicit market relative to the legal market increases.
How do you work with overseas agencies? Because I know that Australia's got a huge illicit tobacco problem, and as we know, what happens in Aussie soon comes over the Tasman to our shores. Something like, I think, nearly half of Australia's 2-point-something million smokers are now smoking illegal tobacco, or tobacco that hasn't been through the excise tax process. Is that alarming to you?
Well, we definitely don't want to end up with a problem the scale that Australia has. There are, in fact, even more concerningly, homicides and arsons attributed to the illicit tobacco problem in Australia, and we definitely don't want to see that here. We work quite closely with our partners overseas, not just the Australian Border Force, but also His Majesty's Revenue and Customs in the UK, as well as other jurisdictions in Southeast Asia.
Is Southeast Asia where we're getting most of it from?
Well, the international supply chain for illicit tobacco is actually quite complex, and there's factories not just in Southeast Asia, but also in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe that manufacture huge amounts of cigarettes which are destined for the illicit market. And they don't make their way directly to New Zealand always. They'll go through other countries and intermediary countries where their origin is concealed, and then they might go into a concealment such as construction materials and things like that. So it's not really straightforward just to say it's all coming from one part of the world, but certainly our seizure statistics would suggest that it's mostly coming from Southeast Asia. If
you were to put a percentage on it, how much do you reckon Customs has seized at the border, and how much has slipped through the cracks perhaps?
Well, that's a great question, and I wish I had a really precise answer to it. It's really hard to estimate. There have been various attempts to estimate the size of the illicit market in New Zealand, and the University of Auckland and University of Otago have both completed studies in recent years on it, and also the tobacco industry completes studies on it as well, which they publish. The range in the size of the illicit market and these estimates is huge. The lowest one is around about 6.8%, and the highest one is around about 24%. Is it somewhere in between? Probably, but I wouldn't really want to take a stab.
The criminals will lose revenue, and we'd like to think that your average Australian is a law-abiding citizen. And generally they were up until a few years ago, until the tax became so extreme. Combined with the cost of living crisis, they just decided that enough was enough and they weren't going to pay those excessive prices. So there is a balance, there is a level where people will hopefully return to the legal product.
Do you think there's a point where we can't increase the excise tax by any more? Like looking at some figures here, the excise tax increased to $1,812.61 per kilo, and compare that to $393.03 in 2009. Now, granted, the smoking rate has decreased since 2009, don't get me wrong, but depending on the brand, that tax today makes up around 80% of the cost of a pack of smokes. Do you reckon we've gone too far?
Well, I'm not really an expert in the economy of it. There is no doubt, though, that the amount of excise is what drives the profitability of the market. So it's definitely a factor, but there's much more to it than just the excise. There are illicit tobacco markets in countries with much lower excise rates than New Zealand as well.
What new technologies or intelligence capabilities are Customs using to tackle this? Obviously, you've got at the border as well, but have you, I don't know, I'm just assuming a whole group of you guys in a room just on Facebook Marketplace searching for listings or something?
Well, we take a bang for buck approach to our investigations. So what we do is, rather than trying to simply suppress every instance of illicit tobacco being sold in the community, we look to target the source of it and take out the people who are profiting from the import of and then the distribution of these cigarettes on a large scale. We get a lot of benefit from community reporting, so Crime Stoppers and also our own Border Protect hotline. But more importantly, we have a very good relationship with industry, and we encourage our industry partners as well, such as freight forwarders and customs brokers, to let us know when something doesn't appear right.
Has the team tackling this at the border grown along with the rate of illicit tobacco, so to speak? Like, do you have as many boots on the ground, to tackle this problem?
Yeah, in 2022, Customs received $10.4 million in funding over 4 years, which we think we've delivered a really good return on investment with our seizure stats and our prosecutions, as well as our asset restraints in that short time. But what's really important, I think, is that you don't outgrow a organised crime problem. You outthink it. So our strategy is basically to make life as hard as possible for these criminals, and in particular, just make it not profitable for them to operate here.
And looking forward, Nigel, what further changes, whether it be legislative, operational or technological, could improve New Zealand's ability to curb illegal tobacco? Really, it comes down to, I think, good old-fashioned investigating and also community buy-in. There might be a sentiment out in the community that illicit tobacco is not actually a serious problem and that it's great that people can get cheaper cigarettes. But what those people are failing to realise is that they themselves are actually being exploited by organised crime, and there are people driving around in very flash cars that those guys have paid for. Thanks for joining us, Nigel. Thanks, Chelsea. Much appreciated. That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.